Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Today is the deadline for underclassmen to declare for the NFL draft. So players that we will know the full pool of draftable players after today. The most notable player in the draft is Caleb Williams, who officially declared for the draft today. There had been all this conversation about, might he go back to school? Does he want ownership in the team that drafts him? All that stuff. This always felt like an inevitable end, was that Caleb Williams was going to declare for the draft. And he'll very likely be the first pick. The question is, to whom? So now with the draft pool set and the draft order, except for the teams remaining in the postseason, of course, set. The question is, what are the Bears going to do at 1? The Bears have the Panthers pick by virtue of last year's trade where Carolina went up to number 1 and drafted Bryce Young. Well, the Bears have the number 1 pick this year. It's Carolina's pick. And Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports is proposing an interesting scenario whereby the Bears decide to keep Justin Fields and trade out of the number 1 pick. They are projecting the Washington Commanders to trade up from number 2 to number 1 to take Caleb Williams. Again, this is Ryan Wilson over at CBS Sports. So he's got Caleb Williams going number 1 to Washington, and then 1 pick later with that selection, the Bears taking Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State, and New England at number 3 going quarterback with Drake May. So the real question then becomes, where do we see Jayden Daniels come off the board? And it's not a long wait. Quite honestly, it wouldn't be a bad situation either. CBS Sports there, Ryan Wilson projecting Jayden Daniels to go number 6 overall to the New York Giants, noting no player did more for their draft stock in the fall than Jayden Daniels, who went from a possible day 3 pick to first-round prospect. He reminds me of Lamar Jackson. The Giants aren't tied to Daniel Jones beyond the 2024 season. That's really, I think, the most notable part, is that if, in fact, Daniel Jones, if the Giants, hypothetically, under this scenario, draft Jayden Daniels, and you still have Daniel Jones under contract for another season, it kind of gives Jayden a redshirt year. And the best example of it is Patrick Mahomes, y'all. Mahomes, of course, went to Kansas City when they had Alex Smith. He sat that first year, got to watch, and then took over as the starter. And I think that can be immeasurable, an immeasurable benefit for a lot of quarterbacks to have the opportunity to just sit and watch for a season. So that would be an ideal scenario for Jayden to go back to the place where, of course, he won the Heisman Trophy. 2 other first-rounders from LSU, and you know who they are. The only question is where. Ryan Wilson at CBS has Malik Neighbors going number 10 to the New York Jets. Of course, the Jets need a lot of help, and maybe it's a lineman to protect Aaron Rodgers, but what about a receiver there to add another target for Rodgers to throw to, along with Garrett Wilson? You'd have a pretty dynamic tandem there with Wilson and Malik Neighbors if it played that way. And then it wouldn't be too much longer that Brian Thomas would have to wait, according to the CBS Sports mock draft, going 15 overall to the Indianapolis Colts. That would be a huge weapon for Anthony Richardson coming back off of injury. And mostly, I think you just feel great about Brian Thomas because, all of these LSU guys made the most of this season. And it's very clear because they all did exceptionally well within this offense. They all increased their draft stock, and they're all going to become just immensely wealthy here in the next couple of months. So congrats to Brian Thomas as well, as it appears he has solidified himself firmly as a first-round draft pick. It's really just a question of how high in this very deep, talented receiver class where you have Marvin Harrison and you have guys like Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. In this mock draft, they got Brian Thomas as the 4th highest selected receiver, ahead of Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell from Texas. So I'm trying to see if there's any more receivers that he has going around 1. That might be it, but still, yeah, that's it as far as the receivers. But that's still, tremendous for Brian Thomas if he finds his way in the top half of round 1. was also interested in what obviously the projections are for the Saints in any mock draft. And, the Saints are super conflicting because what I want to say is, when you're a bad team, you have a lot of needs. But the thing for the Saints is they were 9-8. So you finished above 500. You won 4 of your last 5. It's fair to say, well, how bad are you? But then you provide context and you realize, well, you had one of the lowest rated quarterbacks in the NFL this year. You had the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. And on top of that, you got to face a whole bunch of backup quarterbacks. Like, you didn't face Kirk Cousins. You didn't face Justin Fields. You didn't face Anthony Richardson. You didn't face Daniel Jones. You got to face a whole bunch of backups this year. And still, you could only muster 9-8, and that's because you had to win 4 of your last 5 to get to that point. So, the Saints have a lot of needs. Yes, you need help on your interior run defense. It's fair to look at linebacker and say Demario Davis is 35 years old, although he was All-Pro again this year. How much longer is he going to play? What is Marshawn Lattimore's future? If the Saints do try to move him, do they try to draft a cornerback? They could certainly use help at safety with Tyrann Mathieu aging. On the offensive side, needs abound. I am very much in favor of the Saints drafting a quarterback. You could absolutely use receiver help, depending on what's going to happen with Michael Thomas and his future. You brought in Foster Moreau at tight end, but you could use a tight end if there's a player like Brock Bowers available. And the biggest need might actually be on the offensive line for the New Orleans Saints. And I know the idea of drafting another lineman in round 1 isn't appealing after you just used a first-round pick on Trevor Penning and pretty clearly whiffed. But there's a real chance that Ryan Ramczyk could be calling it a career. And even if he does play, how effective can he be? Andrews Pete took a pay cut just to be back in New Orleans this year. He's probably done. Are you really committed to James Hurst as your left tackle? That's unlikely. And then, as we just mentioned, Trevor Penning appears to be a total bust. So you are in desperate need of offensive line help. And whether you get it in the draft, free agency, or both, that is a spot where there is no discussion. Like, you have got to add offensive linemen. But that's not the direction that this mock draft has the Saints going, because Brock Bowers is sitting there at 14 in this mock draft. And Ryan Wilson at CBS Sports has the Saints taking the tight end out of Georgia, number 14 overall. The quick write-up, the Saints could go wide receiver here too, but Brock Bowers feels like stealing at number 14. I'll repeat what I wrote back on December 4th in my last mock draft. In the last 20 years, 19 tight ends have gone in the first round. 5 of those were selected in the top 10. Eric Ebron, TJ Hawkinson, Kellen Winslow, Vernon Davis, Kyle Pitts. The other 14 were drafted between 19 and 32. I mention this because I think Brock Bowers is special. In fact, he's the number 5 player on my big board, and maybe he's different. He'll be the tight end worth taking in the top 10. For now, though, I have him going in the middle of round to New Orleans. So if Bowers is there at 14, it's hard to argue against making that selection, except for the fact that the Saints will have so many desperate needs on the offensive line and what direction they may go. But if there's great value at 14 and Bowers is there, it would be hard to argue against getting the best player available, even if it's tight end to that spot. So we inch closer to the draft. Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Days, all ahead. And we'll get to this spring's draft and find out what the future is for those LSU guys and, of course, for the New Orleans Saints. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.